Dear listeners, welcome to my short talk about failing to understand. As a music lover and a musician and organizer, I am an advocate of diversity. I believe that diversity is a matter not only of fairness, but also of creative richness. But being open to many and diverse people or groups of people also means being open to a large variety of musics, styles, and aesthetics. And here I observe my own limits. Since the musical field is so large and styles and functions of music so varied and multifarious, being open to them all will inevitably confront me with moments when real, emotional, or affective connection becomes impossible. I can be ready to observe and respect such music, but feel that I fail to understand. The impression is to somehow be outside of the event. Apparently, for certain musics, I lack the resonance, the knowledge, the cultural bath. They do not meet my expectations, and I might feel bored or even annoyed. And in live performance situations, I have no knowledge of their codes of conduct. Looking for the music I know at places which are familiar is the easy way out. But it's reproducing blind spots, and I observe that I am not the only one with this reaction. To turn the music off, to leave the concert, or to simply not even go. There is always too much on offer anyway. But avoiding the confrontation with the unfamiliar and unrecognizable, I am also left with a feeling to miss out and a feeling that I have failed to understand, that I didn't get the message. Hannah Arendt, a philosopher whom I love and who kept saying, I need to understand, ich muss verstehen, points out that making judgments, and then she does not mean being judgmental, is a necessity, or otherwise the cultural status quo will be kept in place. Judging is a collective activity and a way to build a self-determined culture. That goes for musical experiences just as for anything which happens between people and is in this sense political. It is important to not just let the music happen, but also to actively relate to the experience, be it through a question or a critique, if a more spontaneous or enthusiastic response isn't possible. This, however, needs time, imagination, and effort. Now, while pondering this question, I was recently quite accidentally reading about semiotics, the science of reading signs, and came across the writings of Dutch cultural theorist Mieke Bal, which I thought were illuminating for my question. Semiotics as a theory was originally developed in linguistics by, among others, Charles Sanders Peirce, who proposed the triadic model, which includes the object, the representamen, and the interpretant. To explain this, a very simple example, there is the physical object. It could, for example, be a piano. Then there is a word which represents it, also in the absence of the physical object, but only if the person who hears or reads the word piano understands English. So originally developed in linguistics, Mieke Bal applies this principle to the question of meaning making in the arts, and I want to try to apply it here to music. Not very systematically for now, of course, but more as a small thought experiment, as befits a provocation. Mieke Bal explains that, quote, the human being is a semiotic being. Humans possess an immense degree of competence in using various phenomena as signs by giving them meaning. The field, discipline, and perspective of semiotics study the meaning and implications of that characteristic of the human species. The field of semiotics is characterized by interests in a set of questions like what sign systems do we have, what types of signs are operative, how do they function, what is their effect. So, what is a sign? A sign is something that stands for something else. Whenever there is a sign, there are two elements, the thing that is the sign and the thing that the sign replaces. Context is important. It's the relation between the sign and its environment that makes it a sign. e.g. if the music listened on the radio or in a concert hall, it will have a different meaning. Signs need interpretation, which is a subject-bound activity and relates to the social group we belong to. This is dynamic, signs are socially active forces, and so is its interpretation. The sign is only a sign when it is perceived as such by a person who interprets it. Quote, "A sign can only have that meaning, it can only function as a sign if somebody sees and understands it as such." Mieke Ball concludes, "If we take all these requirements together, we can say that a sign is not a thing but a function, an event. A sign does not exist but occurs. A sign occurs then when something is perceived for certain reasons or on certain grounds as standing for something else to someone. It needs interpretation. For this we need to have some basic knowledge or experience of conventions of narrative that allow to understand connections of interpretation. Mistaken interpretations will show by the lack of follow-up. They stop the interpretation, remain isolated, or bring no new insights. On the other hand, there is not such a thing as a mistake in semiotics. Where there is, for example, contradiction, this ambiguity becomes a sign in itself." I would like now to make an experiment and test this on a few musical examples to see how this theory can be brought into practice. I have to limit myself in time and scope for today, so I chose examples of music of now, or from the last few years. It is recorded music and doesn't have words or images, such as, for example, video clips. Both words and images would alter the task a lot. Initially, I also thought I'd choose pieces which do not speak to me or which I do not like, but I dropped that idea as being really next level. I will play 4 short excerpts of pieces I happen to have heard recently. For each of them, I will go through the 3 steps of meaning making, which Mieke Ball proposes. So these are the 3 steps. The first is the sign event takes place with something perceptible, a sonic event or a sonic shape. Second step is the first meaning, where the receiver or addressee recognizes the sign, suggesting a relation to something else, standing for something absent. The question will here be, what is it that the sign stands for? It is not an objective fact, but an interpretation. And the third step is the second meaning, where the sign and the first meaning become together a new sign event or object, and the first sign, which was like what it represents, will generate a specific meaning for me personally, which wouldn't be the same for somebody else. It is more precise and depends on the personal situation and interest. It will promote the quality of life for the receiver, which in this case is myself. So from first sign to second interpretation, it gets from more general to more specific and personal. So here is my first example. So this is a track with a sonic language which is familiar to me. I hear acoustic percussion instruments played with some rhythmical regularity, but not machinic. It suggests a person and a physical effort and hints at the possibility of a live concert situation, although in this case the precision of the music suggests that it has been made in a studio recording. This, however, I can know only because I have the experience of the practices of that specific musical field. On the other hand, there is nothing melodic or even harmonic, something I can equally relate to from my own experience. So the sign event here takes the shape of music, with a first meaning of experimental and possibly improvised music, rooted in classical music, but at the same time diverting from its conventions. But what could be the second meaning? I think in this case it suggests for me personally comfort. The language is familiar, but also the listening situation where this live concert would meet my habits. I would probably sit, listen concentratedly, meet people whom I know, a community. At the same time, it is music which is good for surprises and unexpected turns, but within an idiom which I know. Well, here comes the second example. This track starts very openly with an empty chord. The sound is drony and probably electronic. It could go into many directions from this intro. Then a plucked string instrument starts to play, which takes the music straight away and unambiguously into an Arabic cultural context in terms of sound color and in terms of harmony, although it's clearly contemporary through some electronic details which occur very subtly. I can make this cultural allocation because I have heard music from that part of the world before, and it has evoked feelings and images of melancholia and longing because it suggests a world I don't know. That is probably the second meaning I give this music, and unlike the first example, I have only a vague image of a community being connected to it or a specific listening situation. I'm quite happy to stay alone with my dreams of faraway countries and cultures. And here the third example. Again, the music starts with an open intro, but which starts in this case rhythmically and quite quickly also with an underlaying sustained sound. From the beginning, the aesthetic is electronic and machine and suggests to be part of an international youth and club culture through its energetic rhythmicity. The sustained harmony is ambiguous and awakes a feeling of curiosity for me, linked to the cultural background of this music and the maker. The dynamic rhythm suggests something which the two other tracks didn't have. It says, "Move, I invite you to dance." It is very engaging, and in this sense I also imagine the possible live situation. To me then, it also has another meaning. It is representing a youth culture where I wouldn't be sure to be welcome, or at least where I would be insecure about the behavioral codes. I am intrigued by the music, but as a bystander, not as part of an assorted community. And here the fourth and last track. The last track I chose is starting with what appears to be a field recording of church bells, a very strong and clear cultural image. But it then moves into other sounds which are apparently musically treated, also slightly rhythmical, but only slightly, and some street recordings which make recognition difficult. This track doesn't make itself clear to me, what it represents or what expects or suggests me to do or understand. It leaves me adrift for the second meaning. So here is maybe such a case where Mike Ball says that the ambiguity becomes the sign itself. If I would stop, the effort of interpreting the sign would be lost because the triad of object, Repräsentamen, and interpretant would be broken. But as long as I, the interpretant, am still playing the game, the music has meaning, although the meaning in this case is ambiguity. So this was my thought on failure and meaning making, totally unscientific and just a small pondering and self-experiment. The excerpts I played were from Alexis de Grenier, Hueda Hetfi, Azu Tibalin, and Noor Sokon. Thank you, Juliet, for the interesting brief, and thank you all for listening.